Support for Donnybrook is provided in part by Design Air Heating and Cooling.
Seems fair to me. Well, if you don't know what fair is, you can't make it.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.
Thank you very much for joining us for Donnybrook. Boy, do we have a lot of topics, hot ones this week, so we're going to get to those. But first, let's meet the panelists. In her cardinal red, we welcome the media veteran herself, Wendy Wiese. No cardinal red on this guy. Bill McClellan from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Go Cubs, he says. Sarah Fenske from the St. Louis 314 podcast and St. Louis Magazine. And with his cardinal red, sports editor and columnist for the St. Louis American, Alvin, Reid. Hey, Bill, you were in the courtroom today, and this is a real doozy. Matt McCulloch, the St. Louis County police officer who was arrested in October of 2003 when he went to a trunk-or-treat party in Kirkwood, shot his firearm into the air numerous times and yelled, "Everybody is going to die." Well, he pleaded guilty in early January to 8 counts, endangering children, unlawful use of a firearm, making a terrorist threat. Today, he was sentenced in the court of Judge Nellie Robato. Tell us what you saw.
Well, roll me over, Romeo. I'll tell you what, I was shocked. I have never seen the prosecution more in favor of the defense. I mean, the defense had one witness, and he was a psychiatrist, who had examined Matt in prison, in jail, and came out with he bipolar. And so when the state cross-examined him, he happened to be the same psychiatrist who testified in the Vince Gill case a few years ago. Vince Gill killed his mom, shot his father, and pleaded guilty by reason of insanity, and his dad supported him, and all the family did. And this guy testified that he's legally insane. And Bob McCulloch sneered and ridiculed it. So here this guy was now testing for Matt McCulloch. And the prosecutor said, "Now, you've been cross-examined by Bob McCulloch, right?" And he said, "Yes." "That must have been an experience." Yeah, and he said, "So what I'm asking is, you're not testifying because you're loyal to Bob McCulloch. This is what you really believe." It was like she was a defense attorney. And then she asked him, as a forensic psychiatrist, do you know much about police in prison? How are they treated? "Oh, well, awful." Well, especially in this instance, I thought to myself, she's on the defense side. And thought, well, this is crazy. And I kind of felt, I liked Melissa Price Smith, but I think if you're going to roll over on a big case, you should do it yourself. You shouldn't send some young prosecutor out there. But I thought, even though the state's rolling over, Judge Robato's going to have to sentence him hard, because the recommendation was 3 years. And Judge Robato starts off with, well, if I give you credit for the 80 days you spent in jail and sentence you to 3 years, you'd only do like 9 months to a year. And so I thought she's going to give him like 5 years or something. She said, and we'd have to sentence you out of state, and I wouldn't be able to control you, so I'm going to put you on probation. What? I like Bob McCulloch, and I was hoping that his son wouldn't get 10 years or 8 years, but I thought he would get some time for shooting up a school. But, a $46 fine to the crime victim fund, and Judge Robato is there saying, I know that a lot of you aren't happy about this, but fortunately, there's Kirkwood people, Kirkwood moms, and they're like Canadians, they're just kind of stunned by it. It was shocking.
And by the way, Judge Robato would not allow anyone in the courtroom, including you and the Kirkwood moms.
Well, no. We were, when I got there,
okay.
They said you're in the spillover courtroom. Only Matt McCulloch's family and the victims' families
Okay.
get in. So, so I saw it in the next courtroom
Wow.
But I can understand why
Okay,
Judge Roboto
okay.
didn't want a lot of people in there.
Thank you, Bill, for that first-person testimony
Wow.
from today's courtroom action. Alvin?
Well, I said at this table, I doubt he does today, but that does not calm my bitterness at all. I mean, this is a travesty in the highest order. I immediately made a couple of phone calls. I stepped out of our meeting before this.
Not as a journalist,
Not
as a Kirkwood
Kirkwoodian,
resident.
because
Yep.
oh, Canada, let me tell you,
Right.
I can feel it right now in Kirkwood. And there are a lot of people that are getting a lot of calls.
Oh, there was a fella in the hallway that the
Okay.
deputies had to take away.
Well,
People
was
were
it
upset.
was it because the prosecutors were loyal to Bob McCulloch, who had been the county prosecutor, and this was his son?
That had to be it. There's
It's
no
professional.
way.
It's just that professional courtesy.
But what about
Sometimes-
the judge?
I know.
Why did the judge do this?
I know.
This is
Charlie, when there was a story, and I don't want to bring up any awful memories for anybody, but when Dick Ford's son was arrested, that was handled with kid gloves, and it did not get the kind of attention that it would have if he had not been in the media. That is the opinion of several people.
Well,
Hunter Ford
pled guilty and got life without parole.
Right, and this is
Okay.
I'm just saying that sometimes a professional courtesy.
I feel like this town just runs on this. It's one of the nicest things. Once you get networked in here, people will always take care of you because they know you. But the terrible thing is that it's all about who you know. And so somebody who is the cop, who's the son of Bob McCulloch, he gets a deal that nobody else would have gotten.
I'm sure he would have gotten that deal.
Your old colleague, Chris King, who's now the spokesperson for that office, I saw a little note that there will be no interviews about this decision.
Right.
Well, now you did say he shot up the school, which he didn't. He shot in the air
Okay,
at a
he-
trunk or
okay,
treat.
okay,
At a
right, right.
school.
And no one was
No,
hurt
that's
except
right.
for psychological.
And I even
Yeah.
wrote a column that he'll suffer for this. And as a liberal, I hate to see him get a lot of time. But I thought that they'd
So
give him something.
shooting a gun in the air with a bunch of little kids around saying everybody dies, perfectly okay, Charlie.
Did I say it was
I'm just
perfectly
saying,
okay?
but he didn't shoot up the school. He did this, he did that.
Bill said he shot up the school, and there was a difference. He shot in the
that's
air.
right, that's
Okay.
right.
But-
I thought I explained it pretty clearly.
But no.
what he did.
What I'm saying is, in a sense, like, hey, man, he shot up the school. Okay. Everybody knows what happened. But this is just one of those cases where the only reason that we're nitpicking is because who this person is. It is not because of the crime or what happened or the factual evidence. It's because this is who he is. And
Well,
like
you know,
Sarah said, this is how we roll.
A lot of people shoot in the air in our area and
Okay.
don't serve time. But no, I understand what you're
right.
saying. I want to move on to the second topic,
All right.
not because I disagree with you necessarily, but because of time. F-47. It's the largest military contract for a fighter jet in American history. It could be worth $50 billion. And it's going to come to St. Louis, to Boeing, a company which hasn't made money in 6 years, hasn't launched a decent commercial or military jet in 10 years, is behind on a lot of projects, including Air Force One. And the president this week in the Oval Office announced that this project was coming to St. Louis. So all those good jobs, Alvin, that's good for the region. But how did we beat out Lockheed Martin, which actually has experience in stealth aircraft? Boeing has none.
Look, I don't trust anything coming out of the Oval Office right about now. I don't trust this. And I'm just going to go on the record. I don't think a single F-47 will be produced in St. Louis ever. I just am not buying it. I'm sorry. I don't think I'm alone either. There's some skepticism out there, and I'm not buying it. I think they told him it was going to be 47, and he said, like, yeah,
I love
give it
that.
to Boeing.
I love that.
Love that.
Yeah.
Nah,
Well, I'm gonna just rejoice in the win for the moment because we need a win really badly, and the whole, the affiliation with the geospatial agency. I mean, it seems like things might be turning a corner, and good for Eric Schmidt. The whole Josh Hawley component, though, is really fascinating because he came down on Boeing, and despite that and he really came down on Boeing, and despite that, tongue wagging that he gave them on Capitol Hill, Boeing, got this bid. So good for Eric Schmidt.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy for St. Louis. It's just fascinating to me that we're going through the federal budget and we have to get rid of money for food pantries and we have to like slash employees at the VA, and then we have this like giant money that we're not even going to question and use it to build another fighter jet. Our priorities just seem so out of whack, but I will take the win for the region.
Right, and I thought it was $50 billion plus even more in terms of ancillary expenditures, correct?
I mean, it could be
billions
eventually.
and billions, yeah.
The amazing thing about this country, this contract, maybe the country too, is that it's a cost-plus contract. It's not a fixed price. So they're going to get money in the development phase. They're going to make profits in the development phase, which is rather unusual. It's the best contract ever, and maybe we should be relishing in the win, but it's a little bit weird.
Yeah,
Let me ask you, Wendy, about Mayor Jones. Speaking of weird, at least it seemed that way. Elliot Davis, former reporter for Channel 2, has a very successful Facebook page where in his so-called retirement, he's covering local news. And he had some snapshots of the mayor showing up at a meet and greet hosted by Kara Spencer, the alderman who's running for mayor in Baden, in North St. Louis. And the mayor is standing in the corner with sunglasses on, arms folded, looking a little bit grim, almost like she was crashing the party. What did you make of this?
Well, I follow Elliot Davis, and he does break a lot of great stories. And there were so many people responding to this particular post. But when I saw it, I could only imagine Kara Spencer just out of the corner of her eye catching. It's like, is that the mayor? And Mayor Jones' body language was not warm and fuzzy. It was she looked upset, and she was at the front of the room where candidate Spencer was. She could have, if you believe the stories that have been, floated up the flagpole to explain how she got there, she could easily have made her way back to the back of the room and not be so prominent. But it looked like something out of the Real Housewives of the St. Louis City election. I mean, it was scary.
It's definitely fraught between her and Kara Spencer. And Kara did respond to this by saying, like, this is bonkers. Like, she crashed my event and people felt intimidated by this. I do think the Jones camp has a really innocent explanation for this. And it is the thing that kind of rings true to me, because why would she show up and stand there awkwardly? It ended up looking like such an L for this campaign. And they just made a simple mistake. They were at a forum in the morning that both candidates were at the Urban League. Apparently, people kept coming up to her and saying, "Oh, we'll see you tonight at the forum in Baden." And she thinks, "Oh, shoot, yeah, sure, see you tonight in Baden." And looks this up. Sure enough, they have it listed as some sort of candidate forum. And she only realizes after she gets there and is standing there awkwardly that it's a Kara Spencer event. It makes sense to me. I want to give her the benefit of the doubt on this.
How many times has this happened before?
I mean,
Has
it seems like a
that's my
plausible
point.
explanation.
That's my point.
Yeah.
I would have beat it as soon as
As soon as I realized.
Yeah, okay, yeah, my bad.
Yeah.
Well, not following Facebook, I miss seeing Elliot on TV, but I didn't see this picture.
Yeah.
But I'm somebody who has sometimes showed up at the wrong place myself.
Yeah. I think she has really top-notch schedulers in the mayor's office, and I'm not buying it.
I did notice that she was standing next to her bodyguard. An officer with a
badge.
I don't know. I just remember Claire McCaskill never showed up with anybody. No bodyguard, no nothing.
But times are different, though, now.
Yes, I think you're right,
you know what?
Alvin.
That is true.
I've told people this, that, you know what? I would have never, ever had security around me if I had been in office, and that has changed. I would now.
Well,
I have
maybe
two now.
And if you look at Mayor Tashara Jones's social media presence, the responses she gets are just horrible. It is awful.
I have noticed that, and I think that even if you're a detractor of Mayor Jones, you should,
respect.
Show some respect.
But I get why she might think she has haters out there. I get that.
She gets in a lot of arguments online with Eric Schmidt, with others.
Yeah.
Let me, Kara Spencer. Sarah, you broke a story this week that Opera Theater St. Louis, which is gloriously celebrating 50 years, unfortunately it's celebrating May 8th, the same night as our fundraiser, so I can't be at the Opera Theater St. Louis festivities, but 50 great years, and they're going to move. They've been at the Loretto Hilton Theater in beautiful Webster Groves, and they're moving to the much discussed Caleres property, which is one of the most beautiful, not beautiful, but prized pieces of real estate in the area. How is this not-for-profit doing this?
Well, they are a very successful not-for-profit. It's interesting you think of like an opera company in St. Louis. Like, how can this be a juggernaut? It is a juggernaut. They put on great shows. They do world premieres. They have a very devoted and I think pretty affluent fan base. So they are sitting on a decent amount of money. They're going to have to do, they said, the biggest campaign in their history. They will have to raise more money. But I think they're going to be able to pull this off. And I think this Performing Arts Center is going to be a really nice thing for Clayton. My understanding is Clayton has wanted something like this for a long time. They now have a nonprofit coming in to build it.
Well, Centene was going to build something, and then they backed off. And this is good news for Clayton in the sense that this is the same building that our Clayton School Board crazily announced, hey, we didn't want to tell anybody, but we're about to close on buying the Caleres School. You're doing what? What are you going to put in there? Well, we don't know yet. So it's just good to have that going to somebody.
Well, an opera theater, apparently, according to the article, has had this, and it has had this kind of expansion and upgrade, you know, in terms of acoustics and all of the things that they need for 20 years.
They've been renters the entire time.
Yeah,
they've been an organization, and that's, you know.
I don't understand, though, how Clayton leaders who opposed the school taking over the Caleres property because it was taking the property off the tax rolls would be in favor of this because Caleres pays $1 million a year in property taxes. $575,000 goes to the schools of Clayton, $100,000 to the city, the rest goes to the county. And I don't think any of those organizations can afford to lose any tax dollars.
Well, most importantly, I actually performed on the stage at Loretto Hilton.
Really?
Oh, sing for us, Alvin.
You know, the Performing Arts Center in Kirkwood is doing well, and there were naysayers about that. So I think other shows will be performed at the facility in Clayton, and I think Clayton will get some revenue off that. I don't know if it's sales tax or exactly how that happens. So I think it will generate some money, although it probably won't match what the tax.
And I suspect that Clayton officials were hoping that a regular company would buy it, but nobody would. I mean, the school board, once they had to back off of it, nobody jumped in to buy it.
How can you not do retail at the corner of Maryland and I-170 in...
I mean, nobody's doing
a
retail.
lot of
It's all Amazon, you know. Everybody wants to land some nice little shopping thing. No stores want to open in places like that.
I mean, the school board was singed, I mean, during that conversation.
Oh,
so
I've never seen anything like it. It's always been, just a little
genteel
thing that chugs along, hey, a great school district, and all of a sudden, they're real estate developers.
Okay. Bill, I want to ask you about Pridefest. For 30 years, the festivities in downtown St. Louis for the LGBTQ community and their friends and families has received money from Anheuser-Busch. 30 years of sponsorship, but it's going to end. Anheuser-Busch announced that it will no longer support Pridefest. And actually, some bars in St. Louis now are organizing a boycott of AB products. What's your take on this?
Well, it's just the mean-spiritedness of our times, that a company is afraid that if they're seen helping gay people, that there will be a huge backlash against it. And the shame is, they're probably right. I mean, if I was a stockholder, I'd say, hey, even poor Disney World gets in trouble now. I'd say it's probably right not to do anything for anybody. But it's a sad day. I mean, I'm not a big beer drinker, whiskey in the winter and gin in the summer and a little red wine for my health. But if I were a beer drinker, I'd probably be drinking that Canadian beer. What is it?
Molson.
No, Moosehead.
Moosehead.
Yeah, I'd probably be drinking Moosehead to show my support for our Canadian neighbors.
Okay, but that sounded like the verse of a country song, didn't it?
Yes. It
did. In the summer and the da-da-da in the winter. I have a friend who is highly placed, has been highly placed and made a career out of this, and he was kind of stymied by the reaction. He said a lot of this is cyclical, that companies can, that certainly everybody understands in the current climate why Pridefest would have had this reaction and have been very concerned about it. But that these things really can, you don't go scorched earth, because AB could have come back next year and said, okay, we do have the money. I'm sure that after Dylan Mulvaney,
Right.
They have just come back from that sort of no man's land where they found themselves, and their whole entire publicity and commercial advertising department was upside down for a while. But I hope that AB will come back maybe next year and say, look, it wasn't permanent. We have the funds this year.
I don't think they're going to come back now after this reaction.
yeah.
And I think they could have avoided this if they would have just scaled back. They didn't have to be the big sponsor. They could have just been a lower level sponsor. From talking to the president of Pride St. Louis, he said a lot of corporations took a big step back this year, really downscaled their commitment, but they were still willing to give something and have their name on the flyer. And that's why they handled this so differently. They went from being the top sponsor to
not
nothing.
at all. Yeah.
And I will say, it wasn't just in St. Louis. They also did this for the San Francisco Pride, and I think we'll see more reports of this happening in other cities too as news breaks.
Yeah.
Well, it's a change, because I used to live next door to a woman who was in charge of marketing to the LGBTQ community for Anheuser-Busch. That's 25 years ago. Maybe that's ancient history in marketing terms, but maybe you're right. Times have changed. The thing though is this is like the third parade to be on the chopping block, because first we had the VP parade, which is canceled. The Annie Malone parade came close to being canceled.
It's back.
And
Thanks
it's back.
to you two.
And then now we have the Pridefest parade, which is ribald, but in a city like St. Louis, you need something like that, I think, to kind of show that you're...
Well, I agree, and I just think that, somebody's got to stand up at some time and say, damn the torpedoes. And you would think that it would be a company as large as Anheuser-Busch, but it's just like Bill said, it's sad.
Well, their sales went way down last year. They
lost it.
And they're coming, you know what? And they're just back a little bit ahead of where they were before all that started, I think, based on what I've read. So I could see where.
Is that because they've hired right-wing social influencers?
I don't know, I don't care, but if you're
they're trying,
if
yeah.
you're a
they're
shareholder, you might say, I'm just now getting my stock price back.
Okay.
Let's not go there. Yeah.
Unfortunately, we had a terrible loss in the St. Louis community this week when we lost Brian McKenna, longtime sports broadcaster and the philanthropist. He was always helping not-for-profit organizations. I'm sorry to say, Alvin, Reid, I never met the man, but he was a close friend of yours, and just a couple weeks ago, you guys were in very close touch.
Well, Brian texted me, and I was at a Southside bar called The Hideaway, and he texted me. He said, hey, there's some people that hang out here, and said that they met you at The Hideaway, and and I said, hey, and he told me where he was, which was right down Hampton. Okay, and I said, actually, I'm at The Hideaway right now. We need to get together soon. I haven't seen you in a while. So, we traded texts, and then this terrible accident happened, and I was just shocked. I really was. Brian was genuinely a nice person. And I know a lot of people do a lot of things for not-for-profits, but he was sincere in his work. And, battled cancer, always still had a smile on his face. I laughed because I said, in the screenplay in my head, Brian, I've got a role for you to play, and if it ever gets out of my head and actually on paper, he still has a role in it.
Thousands and thousands of people have expressed their sorrow over this loss, and I think we all have to remember that he wasn't just the honorary mayor of South City, and he didn't just have the impact that he did on so many people, but his family is grieving this loss. And one of his nieces was saying on Facebook that you were the anchor of our family. And so all of our thoughts are with the McKenna family. Just a beautiful group. And his whole attitude in life was, your vibe attracts your tribe. And he lived that, and he was he was a huge Donnybrook fan. He loved Donnybrook.
Yes.
And just an extraordinary guy who life had, really presented him some humongous challenges. And he answered those challenges by being more generous. He could never say no and never did say no, according to his BFF, Iggy, a well-known producer, never said no to a children's charity or any child. So he was just an absolute extraordinary.
He was a good man. No, I
Yes,
just,
he was.
wanted to follow up on that.
Well, I will say he's the third loss we've had in to traffic accident in about 2 weeks, right? One fellow lost his legs, another fellow near the airport lost his life, and now Brian McKenna.
Yeah.
Sarah, you've been writing about traffic calming, and you've been onto it. All right, our thoughts and prayers with the McKenna family. Let's go to the old mailbag and see what people had to say about last week's program. The Webster Kirkwood Times reported the city of Kirkwood used opioid settlement money to purchase a $30,000 truck with a snowplow. As a regular Donnybrook watcher, I know Charlie likes to poke Alvin about Kirkwood, but more importantly, this is an absolute misuse of public money and deserves broader attention. That from Elaine Woodcock of St. Louis County. Larry Snopek of Alton wrote, the APA could have reached out to local businesses for donations of gifts to give to the volunteer workers who help them. Charlie, isn't that the way volunteers are rewarded when you hold neighborhood cleanup drives? And we also heard from Jake Lampert of St. Louis. Alvin, the northern Italian region called Trentino, is doing your idea and paying people to move there and renovate a house. How about that? Write us, care of 9PBS 63108. Don't forget those emails, Donnybrook@9pbs.org. On social media, use hashtag DonnybrookSTL. Call the 9 line at your convenience, 314-512-9094. Express your opinions. Listen to us on your favorite podcast source. Don't forget Donnie Bash. This year it's May the 8th at the Sheldon, our big fundraiser. Tickets are going quickly, so don't be last in line. And tune in to the Donnybrook YouTube channel. It's the 9PBS YouTube channel. More topics that we couldn't get to in the first 30 minutes of this program. Lots of hot ones this week, so we're jammed. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next week at this time.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.